as we like to think the car is essential, much as we look forward as teenagers to the day we get our licence, much as we dread getting to an age where we might lose our licence, much as we still think the fastest way to get from A to B if you live in a city, often it just isn't. In fact, your car will, most likely, sit around doing nothing at all, with or without you in it, for most of the time. Anthony James is the director of the Rescope project and lectures at Swinburne University. Hello to you, Anthony.
Hi, Gillian. Thanks for having me. And nice intro there. That song is about when the car was good for getting around the city, actually, back in the 70s. But, yeah, not so much now.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago, wasn't it, Anthony?
It was, yeah.
Living the dream, sir. What is the reality these days?
Oh, I had that dream too. I used to go around in a 1964 V8 coupe, but yeah, the reality hit me, and then the knowledge hit me. That's when I got interested in researching this stuff.
Oh, you and your facts.
Yeah, well, that's it. The facts come in handy, but of course the experience is what drives it home, isn't it, when you're just out there. But of course the facts come in handy when you've got things like you can find out not only are cars dormant 96% of the time, like not just most, but just about all of the time, even the cars that we're using, but also when it's in motion. You might be walking or cycling down the street and see a car pass you, or be in the car passing a cyclist or a pedestrian and feel like you're going faster. But then you've got to work the time to pay for that car and the servicing and the rego and the insurance, and of course if things go wrong. And so when you take into account the time taken to work it up, the average speed for a car in an average city is about 8 kilometres per hour when you take the time into account for the broader setup that the car operates in. So as opposed to if you walk or ride somewhere and your transaction's pretty much done when you go from A to B, it's a bit different with the car. So the facts come in handy when you can come to see things in a bit more accurate a light, and that can help you make better decisions about how you get around.
So we actually use our cars less than we used to?
Well, that's the funny thing. So we've hit peak car, basically, as they call it, and we hit it over a decade ago. So essentially we're able to neatly siphon off a 20th century baby boomer story around the car as freedom and talk about the 21st century story that's already in tow. And that's basically where we found that the kilometres travelled per person is on the decline, licence acquisition rates are on the decline, urban speeds are on the decline. So basically that story of car as freedom has peaked, we've turned the corner, and now we're looking at urban transport in terms of access rather than ownership. How can you look at transport in terms of a personal toolkit rather than just one tool that is generally oversized and overpowered and taking up too much space?
And overpriced a lot.
And overpriced. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so, I mean, Australia's a pretty big place, though, and Perth is quite a spread-out city, Anthony. Is it a bit different in places like this?
No, it's not. It's unfortunate. I mean, I think it's a legacy of the bigger place. You're absolutely right that we think it's a bit different, and so you hear things like, despite Perth being the most congested city in the country, you hear things like, oh, but that we just, we're just a car city, so we can't possibly change. I mean, it's such a small period of time where that actually worked. If we can take a bigger perspective on our place in the world and how cities can function well, that doesn't really hold. So when we look around the world and we see cities even like Perth now becoming more prosperous on the back of being walkable cities, as they call it, and our own local Peter Newman up the road at Curtin Uni has done a power of research on this stuff, and others too, that we can really see the way of the future is to for urban transport is to set up a dynamic where the car is less and less dominant, and then to get out when you want to access beyond into the broader WA, then you access cars by one means or other, and there are so many ways to do that. And of course, if you're in rural areas, then it's a different story altogether. But if we're talking about urban transport, yes, it's a fundamentally more healthy, more prosperous setup to now look to that access rather than ownership model around cars.
Anthony James is the director of the Rescope project, lectures at Swinburne University. He's written this great article on why it might be time to ditch your car that's in the conversation. Now, I believe, I was really interested, Anthony, reading that even though we're using cars less and they sit in the driveway for most of the time or still, we're buying more cars.
That's right. There's actually, in Perth, there's 100 additional cars per day, would you believe, on the roads. But yes, being used less and less. And it's sort of funny because individually then we think, we're doing a better job for the environment and getting around a little bit easier when we use alternate means. But all the materials and resources and again, time to work up to pay for all that go into then having the car sit on the street or in the garage. But it does say, hey, here's an opportunity, because if we're using our cars less, then we've got the potential to have less cars but actually meet our needs. So there's an opportunity there if we can, as a society, look at, okay, how many cars per capita, for example, might be optimal. And that's happening, as you'll have seen in the article, up the road from where I am at the moment in Melbourne, in the city of Port Phillip. They've actually now started to turn cars systematically into car share allocations. So there'll be different car share companies set up, and increasingly that's going to be their mode of accommodating and a population they expect will double. So they're expecting to have a double population but not have any increase in car ownership. So they will effectively halve their cars per capita. I mean, that's the sort of thing we can start to ask. Where is that sweet spot where we've got enough cars to access to do the right, to get our benefits without all the waste and damage, and then cut to the chase of a healthier, more prosperous lifestyle? Yeah,
because you're not saying, Anthony, that we don't need cars.
That's right, exactly. It's just what is that optimal amount of car ownership, and then if that gets a swag of cars off the road, the ones that are on the road are going to have a much better time of it. So, yeah, it's just about working out what is the best setup for our society going forward in the 21st century, not the century that's just passed.
Yeah. Now, is our attachment to cars? You and I were reminiscing about the 70s. Yeah. Is our attachment to cars a generational thing? Are younger people moving away from that? We must have 2 cars, sometimes 3 in the family.
Yeah, in droves is the short answer to the question. It is passé for the younger generation. As I said, licence acquisition rates are falling off a cliff, and more young people are choosing to live in a city and not having a car, but having access to all the wonderful things about life. And as we develop those higher density zones, more and more of us can do that. So that's part of what is in tow. So it's interesting when you hear, generations like ours sort of naysay this thing. We could never, and Perth could never. Well, it's actually happening. So it's just a matter of the rest of us going, hey, we're seeing the writing on the wall now. Let's get with the program. And of course, governments and others getting with the program too. I mean, you'll have seen in the article, it's the chair of Ford International, no less, talking this stuff, that we can't just keep adding additional cars to the road. So it's not controversial sort of fringe stuff, and the new generation's onto it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it, Anthony?
Yeah.
Now, thank you very much for your time. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks a lot, Gillian.